Chapter 59. Rage Against the Author. Trig was brought back into reality by the chaotic noise of crashing stone. "It's a cave-in!" Tenna screamed. Trig pulled her in close and raised his right hand above his head. Focusing with all of his willpower, Trig conjured a telekinetic shield above himself and Tenna. Boulders the size of cars rained down, smashed into the shield, and broke into harmless bits, which landed nearby. Malum had used his own psionics to shield himself from the rockfall. A temporal force field surrounded the Great Khan, rapidly aging the falling rock until it disintegrated into harmless dust. Meanwhile, Radyr and Appia were nowhere to be seen. "Look up!" Tenna shouted. The cavern had partially collapsed, and daylight was visible through the overhead chasm. Trig turned his head and spotted a flickering green ribbon in the sky above him. And then, something fell through the gap and into the damaged sanctum. A dark cloud of fine particles descended through the hole in the ceiling and began to reassemble itself, taking the shape of an old man. "Panico!" Trig gasped. Panico did not react to Trig's shout. He turned to face the Great Khan. "It was foolish of you to come here, Trura Panico," Malum growled. "I offer you only death, no forgiveness. Leave now, brother, before I am forced to forget the place you once held in my heart." Panico did not move. "You lost the right to call me brother long ago," the old mercenary said. "And if you've done anything to harm those children, then you've lost the right to a second life as well." Malum lashed out, sending a cone of blue soul fire at Panico, who scattered himself to escape the strike. Trig and Tenna ducked behind a fallen boulder to evade the sudden inferno. "We've got to get help," Trig said over the din. "I'm going to get the Song of the Solitaire down here. You smash up the gate he came through." "What about that thing?" Tenna asked, pointing at the broken gate. Trig took another glance and realized she was talking about the silver orb Malum had deposited on the pedestal. Inside his consciousness, Trig felt a powerful lurch of realization and understanding. That silver orb was the second key the Shroud beings had mentioned in the dream world. As soon as Trig focused his mind on the silver orb, the sanctum, battered as it was, provided him with its name. The Voltom Reality Perforator. Trig could see the look of understanding dawn on Tenna's face as well. She too had just figured out the importance of that little ball. "Destroy it," Trig ordered. "Any way you can. Smash it with telekinesis, burn it with soulfire, doesn't matter. Any way you can do it, go!" Trig and Tenna split up. She ran for the broken gate, ducking under psionic volts and blasts of soulfire as Malum kept trying to hit the elusive Panico. Trig turned his gaze to the breach above him. The Song of the Solitaire, still in its daytime aurora form, was circling high over the Great Khan's sanctum. Trig did not understand how this creature lived or interacted with the physical world, but somehow he was able to figure out that the Song of the Solitaire was unable to enter the Khan's sanctum. Not without help, anyway. Trig projected his thoughts upward to the creature. He knew what it was capable of, but the sudden appearance of Malum had changed everything. He had no choice. "If you can hear me, then you know we're out of options," Trig telepathically spoke to the creature. "There's too much at stake. Come to me, and we'll end this together." Trig was desperate. He was grasping at straws and did not have the faintest inkling of a plan in mind. Making up the ploy as he went along, Trig felt a wave of elation as the Song of the Solitaire began to descend. Tenna reached the broken gate and seized the Voltom Reality Perforator. The shimmering orb was no bigger than a clenched fist, yet somehow heavier than 6 gallons of water. Tenna dropped the perforator the instant she realized how heavy it was. It hit the floor with a mighty crack and made a small crater. Malum broke focus and turned to see what made the noise. He spotted Tenna, then disengaged from the fight with Panico at once. A purple beam of light shot out of Malum's hand, striking Tenna in the chest. She fell over to her knees, and Malum was on her in an instant. While Panico swarmed around him like a horde of insects, the great Khan grabbed Tenna in both hands. Her eyes were glazed, as though in a trance. Malum held one hand over Tenna's face, then slowly pulled it away. As he did so, dozens of paper-thin strands of psionic energy appeared to jump away from Tenna's face and into Malum's hand. His facial expression changed as he stole and absorbed all of Tenna's knowledge. With newfound resolve, the great Khan stood up, carrying a semi-conscious Tenna in his arms the same way one cradles a baby. Because of how utterly massive Malum was in relation to her, Tenna looked like a small toddler cuddled in his grasp. "Put her down!" Trig's voice echoed through the cavern. It shook what was left of the ceiling and caused an avalanche on the mountain outside. Panico, Malum, and Tenna all turned to look. Trig was standing in front of one of the minor broken gates. A bright aura surrounded his body, while his eyes glowed with an intense indigo light. Both of Trig's fists were enveloped in soul fire. Looking amused, the great Khan allowed Tenna to slip from his grasp. She ran a few steps toward Panico, who was reforming on the other side of the room. After a few paces, Tenna paused. She stood listlessly in the center of the chamber, a dreamy, faraway expression on her face. She looked as though she had been hypnotized. "Don't you dare touch her again!" Trig yelled. Trig was hosting the Song of the Solitaire inside his own body. He could feel the psionic creature wrapped around his consciousness like a tight-fitting scarf. It gave him focus and additional willpower. He turned his focus toward Tenna. What he was about to do would have been impossible just a few minutes ago, but things were different now. Trig gathered up his psionic healing aura, refined it into a beam, and launched it directly into Tenna's head. Trig could see, as clearly as ever, the great Khan's psionic presence in Tenna's subconscious mind. Trig washed it away with no effort at all. Tenna gasped loudly as her eyes suddenly slid back into focus. Malum also noticed that his hold over her was broken. He glared at Trig. "You are as foolish as your mentor, boy," Malum said. "You cannot coexist with that creature. It can only be enslaved. I'll give you one chance to save yourself. Pledge yourself to me now, and I will teach you to command the Song of the Solitaire. We will take our revenge on the author and liberate the multiverse together, as father and son." A twisted smile appeared on Malum's face. Trig felt revulsion building up inside of himself. He took that strong emotion and converted it into his last, best hope. "Never!" Trig screamed and launched 2 jets of soul fire at Malum, one from each hand. They hit Malum's temporal force field and sputtered out, but Trig kept up the attack, launching a continuous stream of blue fire at the great Khan. Panico launched into action, turning again into a deadly black cloud and attempting to envelop Malum from behind. Defending from all sides, Malum Ralpakin was immobilized. After 2 seconds that felt like centuries, Trig realized the great Khan was losing ground. Under attack by Trig, Panico, and the Song of the Solitaire, Malum was being overwhelmed. "Tenna!" Trig yelled. "We've got this! Destroy the perforator!" To his horror, Malum's voice sounded from inside the Soulfire Inferno. "Tenna! Take the perforator and run through the gate!" "Don't listen to him, Tenna!" Trig screamed and intensified his assault, pushing against the temporal force field and gaining ground with each passing second. "You can be so much more than what you are," Malum yelled through the soul fire. "I can free you from the narrow, one-dimensional life the author has planned for you." Trig could see Tenna out of the corner of his eye. She had picked up the Voltom reality perforator and was holding it in both hands. "Tenna!" Trig yelled. "Destroy it! Go on! Throw it in the fire!" "I can't hold them any longer!" Malum sounded as though he was pleading. "I'm out of time! Run through the gate! Through the gate!" Blue flames were now licking Malum's flesh. "Throw it in the fire!" Trig yelled one last time. Then he saw a flash of movement. Tenna's red hair, whipping behind her like a cape, cut through the scene as she moved from left to right. Trig took his eyes off the Great Khan for a fraction of a second, just in time to see Tenna step backwards through the broken gate. For 1/1,000,000th of a fraction of a moment, Trig and Tenna made eye contact. He saw a tortured face, amber eyes full of sorrow and regret. Then she was gone. Trig's resolve shattered. The soul fire extinguished itself, and the smoke began to clear. Malum Ralpakin fell over onto his right side. His armor was burned through. The metal plating melted into slag. The Great Khan was gravely wounded. Much of the left side of his body was covered in second and third degree burns. The smell of charred flesh made Trig feel sick. For just a moment, Trig, Poniko, and the Great Khan were all on the ground. Trig and Malum started to scramble to their feet, but the Great Khan found his focus first and lashed out. A temporal force field enveloped both Trig and Poniko. For the two of them, the passage of time slowed to a crawl, freezing them in place. Trig could do nothing but watch as Malum, bloody and broken, staggered away from the scene. The Great Khan threw himself into the broken gate and vanished.